Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. For our digital book club today, we are diving into a really fascinating and honestly pretty provocative strategic analysis from the blog luchacrick.com. It's one of those what-if scenarios that reads like a thriller, but it's grounded in some very real-world tensions that are happening right now. So the article just kicks things off with this question. It's so audacious, it kind of stops you in your tracks, right? And this question is really the launchpad for a super deep, speculative look into what would happen if the US just decided to unilaterally take over Greenland. And the author's conclusion? It's laid out right from the start. No ambiguity. The US could physically take Greenland, but the fallout, the consequences of doing that, would be a self-inflicted wound of just catastrophic proportions. Basically, winning this one prize would mean losing its entire global standing. So, you might be asking, why Greenland? And why has this become such a big deal now? Well, to really get the stakes here, we have to stop thinking of the Arctic as this empty, frozen place. It's really more like a giant chessboard, and all the big global powers are starting to make their moves. Okay, this table from the source material breaks it down perfectly. First up, you've got rare earth elements. I mean, this is the stuff that makes our modern tech work, and Greenland has massive deposits. Controlling them would be a huge deal. Then there's the GIUK gap. That's Greenland, Iceland, and the UK. It's a critical naval choke point for keeping an eye on Russian submarines. Next, aerospace warning. Greenland is on the shortest flight path for any missiles coming over the pole. And finally, you have China and its ambitions for a polar Silk Road, which the US is definitely trying to get ahead of. And here's the real kicker. This idea, this perception of Greenland as a security black hole, is the whole justification for the really radical plan we're about to explore. The thinking is, if Denmark can't fully secure it, well then the US has to step in before one of its rivals does. All right, let's get into the plan itself. The author calls it Operation Polar Hegemony, and it's basically a two-part attack on Greenland's sovereignty. This is where the whole thing goes from a thought experiment to a full-on, world-changing crisis. First, the military part. We are not talking about a few extra patrols here. We are talking about 100,000 U.S. troops deployed to the island. Just a staggering number. Now, to put that number into perspective, Greenland's entire population is only about 57,000 people. So you're talking about a military force that's almost double the size of the civilian population. It's just unbelievable. I mean, look at this comparison from the text. It's absolutely stunning. The ratio would be almost 2 soldiers for every single civilian. Even in heavily militarized places like Okinawa or Guam, it's 1 soldier for every 24 to 50 civilians. This proposal is something totally without modern precedent. You're not just occupying it, you're turning the entire island into a garrison state. But wait, the military surge is actually only half the story. The other part of this plan is what the source calls demographic annexation. It's a political move designed to legitimize the takeover, and it's a direct assault on Greenland's self-rule. So to understand just how audacious this is, you gotta look at Greenland's actual law. The 2009 Self-Government Act is crystal clear. To vote there, you have to be a Danish citizen and you have to have lived there for at least 6 months. This plan, to give 100,000 US soldiers the right to vote, well, it completely steamrolls that law. The analysis argues this whole voting gambit isn't just a little illegal, it's illegal on 3 completely different levels. It violates Greenlandic and Danish law, obviously. It also violates the UN's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, because you're essentially wiping out their vote. And incredibly, it would even violate US law, which is designed to make sure soldiers vote in their home states, not in the foreign countries where they're based. Okay, so let's imagine the US actually tries to pull this off. What happens when the rest of the world wakes up and sees the news? Well, according to the analysis, the backlash would be swift, severe, and absolutely devastating. The author lays out this just catastrophic domino effect. It starts with the US taking Greenland. Denmark, a founding member of NATO, immediately cries foul and invokes a treaty breach. And that single act, it could shatter the trust that holds the entire NATO alliance together, leading to its collapse. Then the European Union would have no choice but to hit back with its biggest weapon, its economy. The EU would almost certainly trigger what's called its anti-coercion instrument, which is basically a tool to fight economic bullying. That would kick off a massive trade war, sending shockwaves through the global economy. According to these models, it would cause significant damage on both sides of the Atlantic. It's a self-inflicted economic wound, all for one piece of territory. And here is the ultimate painful irony of the whole situation. Russia and China,
They wouldn't have to lift a finger. By acting like an old-world colonial power, the U.S. would hand them the biggest propaganda victory of the century. It would prove every bad thing they've ever said about the West.
So let's bring it all home. What's the final verdict from this analysis? When you put all the pieces together, the picture it paints is, well, it's incredibly bleak.
The balance sheet here is just brutal. On one side of the ledger, you have one tactical gain, physical control of Greenland. But on the other side, a horrifying list of strategic losses. NATO collapses, a devastating trade war, total diplomatic isolation, and a new reputation as a colonial power. It's the definition of winning the battle but losing the war.
And that's really what this whole analysis leaves us with. It's this powerful and kind of paradoxical question that gets to the very heart of power in the 21st century. When does the act of securing one thing end up destroying the very security you were trying to protect in the first place? If you enjoyed this deep dive into these fascinating source materials, let us know by liking this explainer. And be sure to subscribe for our next one. Thanks for watching.